The rain had fallen for hours, rinsing the city but leaving behind a cold that cut sharper than the water itself. Puddles stretched across cracked sidewalks, reflecting neon signs that flickered half alive. The night hummed with the low growl of buses and the hiss of tires on wet pavement. Somewhere between the noise and the shadows moved a boy, small and wiry, with sleeves that swallowed his hands and shoes so thin they whispered against the ground. Elijah Brooks was 12, but the hollow in his cheeks and the measured way he walked made him look older, like someone the world had already tested too many times. His breath fogged in quick bursts, rising and fading as he crouched beside a pile of flattened cardboard. He lifted one sheet, hopeful, but found nothing, just the black glisten of rainwater and the sour smell of rot. He lowered it back down, carefully, like even trash deserved respect. His stomach twisted with a sharpness that felt less like hunger now and more like pain. He pressed a fist against it, whispering to himself the same words he always did. Just a little longer, Eli. Just keep moving. The city never made it easy. Storefronts glowed with warm light, rows of bread and fruit stacked high behind glass, unreachable as stars. He passed a bakery, inhaling sugar and butter until it hurt, then turned away before longing could break him. Every step felt heavier than the last. That's when he saw it. A shape on the ground, dark against the wet concrete. At first he thought it was another soaked rag or maybe a ruined book, but as he crouched closer, his breath caught. Leather. Thick. Rich. Real. A wallet. He froze. The street was empty except for the hum of traffic blocks away. His hands trembled as he reached out, fingers curling around it. The weight surprised him. Solid, dense, important. He glanced over his shoulder as though the night itself might accuse him, then clicked it open. His heart slammed. Bills, folded neat and crisp, stacked more than he had ever seen in his life. Cards tucked tight, corners sharp, an ID with a smiling headshot, the letters printed bold, Richard Harlow. The air seemed to thicken around him. His stomach cramped so violently he doubled over, teeth clenched. The money wasn't just money, it was his mother's medicine. It was food for a week. It was a bed instead of a floor. He could already hear the doctor's voice softening, no longer saying, "I'm sorry, kid, no credit here." He could picture his mother's lips no longer cracked, her breath no longer rattling like broken glass. His thumb grazed the edge of a bill, testing it like fabric, real, solid, enough to change everything. But then came the other voice, the quieter one, the one that had been shaped by his mother's tired lessons. "We don't take what isn't ours, Elijah, no matter how hard it gets." He shut the wallet quickly, so fast the clasp pinched his skin. He hissed, shook out his hand, then clutched the wallet against his chest as though it might burn him if he held it wrong. His pulse thundered in his ears. From across the street, two store clerks huddled under an awning, smoking to keep warm. One squinted through the rain. "Ain't that the kid who hangs by the pharmacy?" The other shrugged. "Bet he pockets it." Elijah heard them. He didn't lift his head. Shame and anger mixed hot in his chest, but he kept his arms tight around the leather, not in greed, but in protection. The rain dripped steady from a broken sign above him, tapping his shoulder like a metronome, counting down the seconds of his choice. He could run, disappear into the alleys, trade paper for survival. No one would know. Or he could do what his mother's voice insisted, the harder thing, the honest thing. His feet shifted, his jaw clenched, and in that moment, as the city pressed close and the wallet throbbed like a living thing against his ribs, Elijah Brooks stood on the edge of two futures, the one where hunger drove him and the one where honesty, unyielding, chose for him. He pulled his jacket tight, tucked the wallet deep, and began to walk. Not toward the pharmacy, not toward food, but toward an address printed in neat black type. Every step he took was slow, deliberate, and heavy with the weight of a decision that could change everything. And still, as he vanished into the rain, no one watching could say for sure what the boy would do. The rain eased into a mist, the kind that clung to skin and turned hair damp without you noticing until it dripped. Elijah kept his chin tucked low, the wallet pressed under his jacket, as if it might slip away if he loosened his grip even for a second. His socks squished with every step, shoes worn so thin they barely kept the cold from biting through. The streets changed as he walked. The cracked sidewalks gave way to smoother stone, the stores brighter, their windows full of things he couldn't imagine owning, coats thick with fur, watches gleaming under soft lights. His reflection followed him in the glass, small, gaunt, out of place. He quickened his pace. He tried not to think about the cash, but it sat in his mind like a drumbeat. With every block, it whispered louder. He imagined slipping just one bill out. Who would notice? Not the man who carried so much. One bill could mean soup for days. One bill could mean the medicine the doctor had circled on that white sheet. He pictured the box on the pharmacy shelf, blue letters standing bold, a promise of healing. His chest tightened. He could take it. He needed to take it. But then came the memory. His mother's hand, thin and trembling, resting on his as she whispered through a coughing fit. "Don't let the world make you smaller, Eli. Don't trade yourself for it." Her voice cracked in his head now, as sharp as the ache in his stomach. He shut his eyes for a moment, walking blind, counting his steps to steady himself. 10, 20, 30. His lips moved with the numbers, a rhythm to drown out temptation. When he opened them again, the world looked the same, but his choice had grown clearer. The wallet wasn't his. It had never been his. A bus rattled by, spraying water onto the curb. Elijah jumped back just in time. The driver glanced at him, eyes narrowing, then turned away. The city kept moving, impatient, as if daring him to fall behind. He adjusted the wallet inside his jacket and took the turn toward the street printed on the ID. The houses grew larger, spaced apart with neat fences and trimmed hedges. His feet slowed. Each step closer to the address felt heavier, like gravity itself wanted him to stop. What if they didn't believe him? What if they thought he'd stolen it? He pictured police lights flashing, questions he couldn't answer, hands pulling him away while his mother coughed alone in that dim room. He almost turned back. Almost. Then he saw it. Tall iron gates rising out of the mist, lamps glowing on either side, the numbers set in iron. The address matched. His throat went dry. He stood there, shoes leaking, jacket clinging damp to his back, a boy carrying a secret heavier than his frame. He wiped his palm against his jeans and pressed the bell. The chime rang deep inside, echoing through a house he couldn't see beyond the hedges. He waited, small and stubborn, rain ticking against the metal, the wallet thudding like a second heartbeat against his ribs. And in that pause, just before the gates groaned open, Elijah's story balanced on the edge of change, though he had no way of knowing what waited for him on the other side. The gates shuddered, gears turning with a low metallic groan, and Elijah flinched as though the sound alone could swallow him. Slowly they parted, opening onto a driveway that stretched longer than any street he'd ever walked. Lamps lined the gravel like watchful eyes, their glow painting the mist in pale gold. He hesitated. His reflection in the wet stones looked smaller than ever. Thin frame, dripping hair, shoes leaving dark, messy prints on the pale gravel. He tugged his jacket tighter, tucked the wallet deeper, and forced himself forward. Each step crunched louder than his heartbeat. The mansion rose at the end of the drive, towering and still. Windows gleamed with light, but none revealed what waited inside. Elijah's breath came shallow, each puff of white mist vanishing into the night as quickly as it left him. The front door opened before he reached it. An old man stepped into the light of the entryway. He wasn't frail, not the way Elijah expected someone with white hair to be. His posture was straight, his coat draped across his shoulders, as though even gravity obeyed him. His gaze swept over Elijah, sharp and quick, the way a scanner passes over a barcode. "Yes?" The man's voice carried authority, calm, clipped, the sound of someone used to being answered. Elijah's throat tightened, his hands shook as he fumbled the wallet from inside his jacket. He held it out with both palms, his voice no more than a scratch. "You dropped this." The old man's eyes flicked down, his brow lifted a fraction as he took the wallet, flipping it open. Cards aligned, cash thick, nothing missing. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain whispering against the roof. "And you are?" the man asked, voice even, but with something else now, curiosity threading beneath the authority. Elijah shook his head quickly. "Doesn't matter." His voice cracked. "What's on?" Eager than he meant it to be. Panic stirred in his chest. If he stayed too long, questions would come, questions he couldn't answer. His mother's cough echoed in his memory, a reminder pulling him away. He stepped back, then turned, his feet already quickening down the gravel. "Wait, where did you—" The man's voice followed, but Elijah didn't slow. Shoulders hunched, head low, he fled down the drive. The gate's side closed behind him, cutting off the glow of the mansion and returning him to the shadowed street. Elijah exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. The wallet was gone. The burden was lifted. Still, his chest burned with fear. Had he done enough? Would the man believe him? Did it matter? He didn't see the curtain shift upstairs, nor the figure standing in the window, watching. Inside, Richard Harlow weighed the wallet in his hand, not a dollar missing. The boy's voice replayed in his mind, scratchy, cautious, but steady with honesty. Most would have taken something, a child especially, pressed thin by hunger, but not this one. He slipped the wallet back into his coat pocket, eyes narrowing with thought. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "Let's see." And outside, Elijah's thin frame disappeared into the mist, unaware that his choice had just tethered his life to a stranger's gaze, and nothing would ever be the same again. The mist clung low, curling around the lampposts as Elijah hurried down the narrow street, his jacket pulled tight against his ribs where the wallet had been. The weight was gone, yet his chest still felt heavy, as though the choice lingered inside him, pressing harder than the leather ever had. He moved quickly, not running, but with the pace of someone who wanted to escape the memory of being seen. Behind him, a car door clicked shut. Richard Harlow stood at the edge of his drive, polished shoes untouched by the rain thanks to the umbrella his driver held. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched the boy vanish into the night, shoulders hunched, steps uneven. Something in that crooked stride gripped him, a tug of recognition he couldn't place. At last, he murmured, "Stay back, keep him in sight." The sleek car purred to life, rolling slow, lights dimmed. Elijah didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the sidewalks, on the cracked pavement where puddles mirrored the broken neon signs above. He passed the bakery again, slowing just long enough to breathe in the sweetness he couldn't afford, then forcing himself forward before longing turned to anger. His stomach clenched until he thought it might fold him in half. The cash returned to its owner replayed in his head like a cruel trick. He had touched the cure to all his problems and walked away. He tried to steady himself with numbers, whispering them under his breath. 10 steps, 20, 30. Each count was a wall against the rising tide of regret. From across the street, Richard watched through tinted glass. The boy's frame was slight, too slight, his jacket clinging damp to his back. Every movement betrayed need, but not weakness. There was a strange endurance about him, the way he kept walking, as if sheer will could keep him from collapsing. Elijah reached the pharmacy, the one with the flickering cross of Tajimrem, bove the door. He hesitated, fingers trembling as he tugged the hood tighter over his head, then he slipped inside. Richard leaned forward, eyes narrowing, the wallet tapping against his knee. Inside, the harsh fluorescent light cut across Elijah's face, exposing the hollows beneath his eyes. He stepped to the counter, voice low, words too quiet for Richard to hear from the car. But the pharmacist's shake of the head was clear enough, his mouth set in a line Elijah already knew too well. "No credit, kid. I'm sorry." Elijah bowed his head. His hands fumbled at his shoes. He slipped one off, holding it out across the counter like an offering. His voice cracked as he whispered something, an exchange, a trade, but the pharmacist pushed it back, waving him away. Elijah jammed the shoe back on, laces sloppy, breath shallow. Shame burned hotter than hunger now. He turned for the door. Richard's jaw tightened, his chest, so often cold with distance, now stirred with memory, his son's face pale in a hospital bed, gone before a cure could be found. He saw Elijah, not as a thief, but as a child carrying a fight too heavy for his years. The boy stepped out into the night again, pulling his jacket close as if it could protect him from more than the rain. His eyes glistened, not from water, but from the weight of failing his mother again. He whispered into the mist, half prayer, half promise. "Tomorrow, Ma. I'll figure it out tomorrow." Richard leaned forward in the back seat, voice low but certain. "Follow him. Don't lose him." The car crept on, its engine softer than the boy's footsteps. Elijah weaved through alleys where walls were scarred with graffiti and dumpsters stank of rot. Every corner stripped another layer of pretense. This was his truth. Shadows, cracked pavement, hunger, and a mother waiting in the dark. And behind him, hidden in the slow crawl of a luxury car, he walked the gaze of a billionaire who had just decided that this story, this child, was not one he was willing to look away from. The alley narrowed into silence, broken only by the drip of rain from bent gutters. Elijah's steps slowed as he neared a squat, crumbling building wedged between taller ones like a forgotten tooth. Its bricks sagged with age, its windows patched with cardboard and tape. The kind of place the city passed by without notice. The kind of place where people like Elijah learned how invisible they truly were. He paused at the entrance, glancing behind him. The street was empty, only shadows moving in the mist. He exhaled, relieved, then slipped inside. From the car parked half a block away, Richard Harlow watched. The building was more ruined than home. A pang stirred in his chest. Anger, not at the boy, but at a world that let a child return wallets fat with money only to walk back into that. "Lights off," Richard ordered. The driver complied, killing the glow. Together they watched the boy vanish into the dark. Inside, Elijah's shoes slapped against cracked linoleum as he climbed the stairs. The smell of mildew clung to the air, mixed with the sour tang of damp clothes never fully dried. At the top floor, he stopped before a door held shut with a strip of rope tied through the knob. His fingers worked quickly at the knot. He slipped inside. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp with a shade bent sideways. A woman lay on the mattress tucked against the far wall. Her hair, once thick, clung damp to her forehead. Every breath she drew rattled, shallow and uneven. "Ma," Elijah whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. His voice softened, almost breaking. "I'm here." Her eyelids fluttered. She smiled faintly, though the effort seemed to cost her. "Eli." He brushed damp strands of hair from her cheek, his hands trembling but careful. "I almost had it tonight. The medicine. I swear I'll get it tomorrow." She shook her head weakly, the motion barely more than a twitch. "Don't promise what you can't." Her words trailed into coughs, harsh and wet, tearing at her chest. Elijah grabbed a worn towel from the chair and held it to her lips until the fit passed. "I'll make it happen," he said fiercely, though the tears in his eyes betrayed him. "I don't care how." She reached for his hand, her grip frail but steady enough to guide his gaze back to hers. "Just don't lose yourself, Eli, not for me, you hear?" He swallowed hard, nodding, but inside he burned with frustration. How could she ask him not to change when the world demanded it? How could he keep being honest when honesty kept them starving? Outside, Richard stood now, having left the car. He lingered at the mouth of the alley, shadows stretching around him like a cloak. From the building's cracked window, he saw the boy's silhouette kneeling beside the woman. He couldn't hear their words, but he didn't need to. The picture told him everything: sacrifice, desperation, a child trying to hold the weight of two lives. Something inside Richard shifted, his memories cut deep. A hospital bed, sterile white walls, the helplessness of money buying nothing when time was already slipping away. He clenched his jaw, the old wound bleeding fresh. The boy had returned the wallet untouched, and now Richard understood why. The decision formed in him with the clarity of a blade. This boy's story was not ending here. Elijah pressed his forehead to his mother's hand, whispering promises he didn't know how to keep. And in the shadows outside, Richard Harlow turned back toward his car, the wallet heavy in his pocket, his mind already weaving a plan that would bring their worlds crashing together. Neither of them knew it yet, but the lines between billionaire and beggar had begun to blur, and nothing would stop what came next. The morning broke gray and brittle, the kind of light that felt tired before the day even began. Elijah stirred from the corner of the mattress, careful not to wake his mother. Her breathing was ragged, uneven, but steady enough to let him slip away. He tugged on his shoes, their laces frayed to threads, and pulled his hood low before stepping into the hallway. The building groaned around him as he descended the stairs. Somewhere a baby cried, somewhere else a man cursed at a door that wouldn't lock. Life here was stitched together by survival and silence. Elijah pushed into the street, the cold biting at his cheeks, hunger gnawing like a restless animal. He didn't notice the car waiting. From the back seat, Richard Harlow watched the boy emerge. His driver's hands rested on the wheel, waiting. Richard's eyes followed Elijah's every movement, the way he hunched his shoulders, the way he carried weariness like armor. There was no hesitation in Richard now, only resolve. "Pull ahead," he ordered quietly. The car eased forward, rolling alongside the boy before coming to a slow stop. Elijah stiffened, eyes darting to the sleek black car. He instinctively stepped back, ready to run. The window lowered with a quiet hum, and there he was, the old man from last night, framed in leather and shadow. "You returned something of mine," Richard said, his tone calm, even. "I didn't thank you properly." Elijah's throat tightened. He glanced around. Empty street, closed shops, no escape but backward. His voice came low, cautious. "Didn't do it for thanks." "I know." Richard studied him, eyes sharp but not unkind. "That's why it matters." The boy shifted, restless, suspicious. "What do you want?" Richard let the silence stretch for a beat. Then, "Breakfast." Elijah blinked. He thought he'd misheard. "What?" "You're hungry," Richard said simply. "Let me buy you breakfast." Though words hit harder than they should have. Hunger had been gnawing at Elijah for so long it almost felt like part of him, but he shook his head quickly, pulling his hood lower. "I don't take handouts." Richard leaned forward, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of someone who is not used to being refused. "You took nothing from my wallet when you easily could have. This isn't charity, it's balance." Elijah hesitated, his stomach twisted, the smell of bread from the bakery down the block reaching him like a cruel joke. He looked at Richard again, at the sharp lines of his face, the eyes that seemed to see more than he said. "Just breakfast," Elijah muttered, as if reminding himself. Just breakfast, Richard echoed and gestured to the door. The boy slid inside cautiously, the leather seats swallowing his thin frame. The car purred back into motion, silent but powerful. Elijah kept his eyes on the window, on the blur of streets rushing by, but his pulse pounded loud in his ears. Richard sat back, studying the boy in the reflection of the glass. This wasn't just hunger he was feeding. This was the start of something bigger, something neither of them fully understood yet. And as the city opened before them, both carried the same quiet question, unspoken but heavy in the space between. What happens next? The diner smelled of frying bacon and burnt coffee, a scent that clung to the air like a stubborn memory. The place wasn't fancy, checkered tiles cracked at the edges, vinyl booths patched with duct tape, but to Elijah, it might as well have been a feast hall. His stomach clenched the moment he stepped inside. Richard motioned for a booth near the window. The waitress, tired eyes rimmed with eyeliner that had smudged into soft shadows, didn't even blink at the odd pair. An old man in a tailored coat and a boy with damp hair and shoes too thin for the season. She slid menus onto the table and asked, "Coffee?" "For me," Richard said. Then, looking at Elijah, "What would you like?" Elijah froze, eyes darting to the menu. Words swam in front of him. Omelets, pancakes, hash browns. It all felt like a test. He wanted to point at everything, but pride stitched his mouth shut. "Just toast," he muttered, almost inaudible. Richard didn't move. He set the menu flat, eyes narrowing slightly. "Toast isn't breakfast. Order properly." Elijah bristled, gripping the edge of the seat. "I said toast." The waitress raised a brow, but Richard held her gaze with a small nod. "And pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, orange juice." His voice was final, dismissing argument. When she left, Elijah's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for that." Richard leaned back, folding his hands. "I didn't ask you to return my wallet either, yet here we are." The boy looked away, cheeks burning. His reflection in the glass window stared back, small, defensive, tired. He hated the way hunger made him feel, weak, exposed. The food arrived fast. Plates clattered against the table, steam rising from stacks of pancakes, eggs glistening with butter. Elijah's stomach growled loud enough to fill the silence. He tried to hold back, but the smell broke him. His fork moved before his pride could catch up. Richard watched quietly as the boy devoured the first bites, the speed of someone who didn't know when the next meal would come. Elijah caught his stare and slowed, embarrassed. "You eat like someone's going to take it from you," Richard said softly. Elijah's voice cracked as he answered, "Because they usually do." The words hung heavy. For a moment, the clatter of dishes and low murmur of other diners faded into nothing. Richard's eyes softened, though his face stayed composed. He lifted his coffee, sipped slowly, then asked, "Your mother, she's sick, isn't she?" Elijah froze mid-bite, fork hovering. Suspicion flared. "How do you—" "I saw you at the pharmacy." Richard's voice was calm, not accusing, almost gentle. "I saw you try to trade your shoes." Elijah's throat tightened. The shame of that moment returned with a burn. He set his fork down, fists clenching in his lap. "You followed me?" "Yes." Richard didn't flinch from the accusation. "Because I wanted to know why a boy who needed money more than anyone I've ever seen didn't take a single dollar from my wallet." The boy's chest rose and fell too fast. His voice cracked when he finally whispered, "Because it wasn't mine." Richard studied him. This thin, stubborn boy sitting straighter than his bones seemed to allow. His words, raw and unpolished, cut deeper than any speech about morals ever could. For the first time in years, Richard felt the ground shift beneath him. Not in boardrooms or contracts, but here, in a diner booth across from a starving boy who had chosen honesty over survival. And as Elijah picked his fork back up, cheeks flushed but eyes steady, Richard realized he wasn't just feeding a child breakfast. He was staring at the start of something that would change both of their lives forever. The rain had thinned to a mist by the time Richard's car eased back into the streets. Elijah sat with his hands folded in his lap, the weight of a full meal still foreign in his stomach. For once, he didn't feel the constant gnaw of hunger. Instead, he felt something stranger, heavier, questions pressing against his ribs. He kept stealing glances at the man beside him. Richard didn't fit here. Not in the cracked leather booth of a diner, not on these streets lined with peeling paint and flickering neon. Everything about him, his suit, his watch, even the way he sipped coffee, belonged to another world. And yet, he had followed Elijah here, sat across from him, watched him without judgment. Why? The car slowed, then stopped at a red light. Elijah finally asked, voice sharp with the suspicion he couldn't shake, Who are you? Richard didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the window, on the rain-dappled city passing by. When he finally spoke, his tone was even, but it carried weight. My name is Richard Harlow. You've seen it on the card inside my wallet. Elijah nodded stiffly. So, just a name. Richard turned then, his gaze direct. And what does that name mean to you? Nothing, Elijah said quickly, though the word felt defensive. The light changed. The car rolled forward, quiet except for the hum of the engine. Richard leaned back, exhaling like someone preparing to open a door long kept shut. It means something to this city. Harlow Holdings, Harlow Steel, Harlow Pharmaceuticals. Buildings, factories, foundations. My name is on half of what you pass every day, though most people never look up to see it. The words hit Elijah like a stone dropped in water, ripples spreading slow. His mind scrambled, trying to stitch them into something that made sense. Harlow. He had seen the name before, on a sign above a bank etched into a hospital wing. Big, untouchable letters. Letters that belonged to money, power, people who never walked streets like his. He swallowed, throat dry. You're rich. Richard's mouth curved faintly, though not in amusement. That's one word for it. Elijah shifted in his seat, suddenly too aware of the torn cuffs of his jeans, the dampness in his shoes. His chest burned. Then why follow me? Why come to my place? You could have just let me leave. Richard studied him, gaze unwavering. Because I've met men with more than they could ever spend, and they all took more anyway. Then I meet a boy with nothing, and he refuses to take what wasn't his. That means something to me. His voice dropped lower, rawer. More than you realize. Elijah's pulse hammered. The world felt tilted, unreal. A billionaire had followed him through alleys, into the mildew-stained hallway of his building, had stood at his door and offered help. And now here he sat, speaking as if Elijah's choice had carved a mark deeper than contracts or fortunes. Elijah shook his head, voice unsteady. People like you don't notice kids like me. Richard's eyes darkened, a shadow of grief flickering across them. I notice now. The car turned a corner, city lights reflecting off wet pavement. Elijah stared out the window, his heart racing with something he couldn't name. Fear, disbelief, maybe hope. The truth sat between them like a secret finally unearthed. And in that quiet, the balance of their lives shifted for good.